What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to Salty Runback, here to be your weekly intake of North American Developmental League of Legends. We've reached episode number 50 of our podcast, and what better time to have that happen because we have our new CLOL broadcast starting this Saturday, which is tomorrow as you see this episode. We have been spending the entire week planning things out, which, if you can tell by both my location and the duration of this episode, means that this 50th episode of Salty Runback is going to look a little bit different, but we'll get into that in just a second. My name is Grapes. I'm joined alongside Hawk. Hawk, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Grapes. It is episode 50. What a milestone we have now hit for Salty Runback, the big 5-0. And as you've said, unfortunately for the next couple weeks, our time and energy is probably mostly going to be going towards the live Salty Runback CLOL product. However, we are still here to talk maybe for the next 40 minutes or so about everything collegiate.
Yeah, make sure to check out all of the streams. They're going to be on twitch.tv/SaltyRunbackPod, twitch.tv/RunningTheRift, and then the Winthrop Grandview series is going to be on twitch.tv/Winthrop Esports. We'll make sure to update you guys as we talk about all these matchups, about when and where you can find them, but we will have every single game from this point forward until the grand finals of the CLOL Championships broadcasted by us, thanks to you. You can still check out the link down below if you want to continue to support Collegiate and what we are doing, and I think you're going to like what we have, Hawk, because I don't know about you, but I'm really excited for when these games go live, because we got a great show planned.
Oh yeah, this is, I don't know about you, maybe the most monumental thing that I've done in my career, and I'm so happy that we have so many, talented people involved to put on such a great show for all these amazing teams. It has been a lot of fun just so far, even behind the scenes, putting this together and seeing the show get created by, both ourselves and everyone that we're working with, right? And when it goes to screen, it is just going to be completely amazing. And this, I think, has a chance to be the best CLOL yet.
Yeah, so make sure to check those streams out, and let's talk about some of the matchups that we'll be watching this weekend, as we are in the round of 16. Best of fives, 8 of them, to determine who enters the double elimination portion of the bracket. And we're going to do an extended headlines for this episode of Salty Runback, covering every single matchup in that top 16. We're going to start off with Maryville versus UCI, who, is a matchup that maybe some people were expecting, but for UCI specifically, maybe not how they actually looked in their series against Harrisburg. Specifically, a very clean 2-0 against Harrisburg, where Kurulean ended up subbing in for Light Pulse, and he will be the starting support for this team moving forward. Out of this roster, Hawk, who has struggled over the last couple of months, do you think that Kurulean entering for UCI really did make that team stronger?
It's an interesting question because, I thought Light Pulse was not really one of the problems on that team, actually. I thought Light Pulse was playing pretty well. However, Grapes, I will say, I think Kurulean is quite good. I think Kurulean is a very good player. So I do think this maybe makes UCI stronger. And sometimes, when a team's struggling, it can be good to just make a change that shifts the dynamic, right? And brings a new perspective to bear. And I think Kurulean has potentially made UCI stronger in that way. Because this also, I believe Light Pulse has been like their coach as well. And so this opens up Light Pulse maybe to spend a little bit more time, when you don't have the barrier of teammate in terms of your dynamic, right? And you're just able to focus more on being a coach and being like a more unbiased, like sixth member that's from behind the scenes. It can actually really help that dynamic as well, and teams improve. So yeah, I'm actually willing to say I do think UCI has gotten stronger. However you feel about how Harrisburg played at the end of the season, I do think, UCI was struggling equally so before making it to the college championship, Graves.
Yeah, we talked about that matchup last week as one where we weren't really sure what to expect from either of those teams, because they both looked so inconsistent coming into the championships. But UCI really pulled it together, and I think a large part of that was due to Kurulean. He had some really good Thresh games in that series against Harrisburg. I remember either on a Salty Runback episode or somewhere else, I was talking about how I thought for UCI, like, Kurulean was one of the best players that they could potentially sub in, but it was not in a role where I thought there was necessarily a problem. As you mentioned, Light Pulse played really well for that team, especially towards the beginning. But yeah, as you said, sometimes you just need that little shift. I don't think it was specifically the support that was the problem for UCI. Mike Young specifically looked really good in that series against HU, specifically that first game on the Lee Sin, had some really, really sick plays. And so, I think that combined with just teamwork and a new roster looking together. I think UCI actually are at their most impressive looking portion or most impressive looking status that we've seen from them since the start of the year, where they went 4-1 in that OQ. The problem here, Hawk, is that they're playing Maryville.
Yeah, that is the problem. I think, regardless of how good this team is, I'm just going to be straight. I don't think they overcome Maryville. Maybe they take a game, it's possible. I don't think any of these teams are like guaranteed sweeps, especially in a best of 5. Like, sweeping a best of 5 is hard, winning 3 games in a row. I think there's definitely some possible sweeps coming in this weekend, but like I think every team has a chance to just take a game. But for UCI, I do think it's going to be a tall order against Maryville. I think the point that you made, Grapes, Mike Young played very, very well in their series against Harrisburg. And I'm going to be straight. I think Mike Young has looked pretty fucking washed since he's gotten to UCI. And so games where he plays well, UCI oftentimes actually wins them. And so seeing that is really good, a good sign for me, because he was playing very badly against, say, like, Weber, right? He was not playing very well in that series. I thought he played okay against USC. And so seeing him on form, I think, is going to be a huge difference maker for this team. I mean, Grapes, I think back to when UCI went 4-1 in Open Qualifier to start the year. Mike Young was also playing well back then. So I'm kind of hoping, Kurulean coming in, Mike Young maybe playing well. This is what would be like sort of the factors in UCI's resurgence, as it were.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I think both of us picked Harrisburg in the series, so already our brackets were busted pretty early on. So
yeah.
Let's give ourselves a bit of a redo as we go through these headlines. What is your prediction for this series? MU, we didn't learn too much about them because they just played against Wake Tech, but I guess what's your prediction? Does UCI take a game?
So I'm going to stick to my guns of last week, which is I don't think it matters how well UCI or Harrisburg are playing, because I just think Maryville is that much better. And again, this is meant to be a testament not to like, oh, UCI and HU are bad, but Maryville is just that goddamn good. I think Maryville sweeps this series. I think UCI can take a game. I will be impressed if they do. I will be happy if they do. However, I think this is Maryville's series through and through, and they should be able to sweep this.
I'll give UCI 1 game, and that's just because I feel like MU hasn't had to take a game super seriously in a while.
But they just played SLU 2 weeks ago. What do you mean?
I mean, did it look like they were taking that game seriously? I don't know.
They won 3-0. I mean,
no, but if you watch the games, they were really messing around, and so maybe in the moments that matter, maybe they could take away a game. I'll give them 1. Although again, I think Maryville very, very favored in this series.
Fair enough, Grapes. I think if UCI takes a game, it'd be cool, and I'd be happy for them. Again, like kind of battle of like the old guard a little bit here, Maryville against UCI. But Grapes, we got a lot more matchups to talk about, so maybe let's hop down to the second one in Quad A. Fisher against Colorado Boulder. I'm asking the questions this time. Did we overestimate our 3 seeds that bowed out early, UT Dallas and Weber State?
Yeah, so just to put some context here. CU, a 6 seed, upset UT Dallas, and then Weber, down under in the lower half of this side of the bracket, which we'll be talking about later, lost to Ottawa, a team from the MEC, who are both 6 seeds. So these are the teams that were hot on those quote-unquote Cinderella runs, and they ended up dropping in that first round. And in terms of overestimation, perhaps, but also you have to consider the journey that these teams did take to get up to that bracket. Weber went undefeated in West. UTD took 2 games off of St. Thomas in that grand finals, and you can argue how real those games were. But when you watch the tape, they were pretty well played games by that UT Dallas roster, and I think CU just were able to play a little bit better. We did not see them at full strength in a while because the last series that we saw them play in, they were running with a bunch of different subs. I think one Tyler actually had a really good series against UT Dallas. Saligo played pretty fine as always, and I think this team has a very unique or a very specific identity that they were able to capitalize on. And UT Dallas, whose main focus is definitely that bot lane with Deftly, never really got anything going. And so I think it's partly stylistic matchup, but then also, roster to roster, I probably would value CU's a little bit higher compared to UTD's, and it ended up showing despite some of the results that happened a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I think overestimate is a strong word because, I mean, I don't know. We definitely had high hopes for UT Dallas and Weber. I know we both, we both had like UT Dallas as kind of like our, like I said, I think we called it like the upset flavor of the month. You know what I mean? Where like, I think I said Fisher should make it to top 8. But, it's fun to predict UT Dallas, and we just happened to both do so. And Weber, we expected to be competitive. However, I also want to remind people, I think the expectation that we set was that the last 2 seed, which is Northwood, all the way down to like the first 7 seed, which was Converse, we expected to be quite a thick soup of competitiveness. And like Weber and Ottawa went 3 games, for example. It's not like Weber folded and died or anything. And the rest of West still did really well. So, no, I don't think I think overestimate is a strong word. I mean, they bowed out early. It happens. They got upset. However, I think while our expectations were hopeful and excited for these teams, we were not saying necessarily that we expected them to really go on a crazy deep run. I mean, we both had Weber getting out in top 16 anyway, kind of going off that. So I think that would kind of be where my feelings lie on this. I'm sad for those schools. It did feel like they were having quite a resurgence. Weber in particular was one of my favorite stories coming into the championship. But, I mean, congrats to Ottawa. And we'll talk about MEC in a little bit, Grapes, with one of our other matchups. But, yeah, this is now Fisher against Colorado. Colorado, they 2-0'd Texas, didn't they? They are potentially a threat here.
I do think that maybe one of the weaker areas of Fisher is their bottom lane with DMK subbing in over when Wixie was the intended starter on that roster. I will say DMK looked very good in the series that they played against Ball State, but with how CU has been playing the map, specifically around bottom side, I would not be surprised to see that again become a focus in this series. And I think actually, if we're doing predictions right now, CU have a really good chance to win this one. I think they have one of the strongest players out of all 10, even though Keel and Jenkins are here. I think that Saligo is still very, very good. And I'm going to give it to them 3-2 as my spicy upset. I'm still going to doubt Fisher.
Ooh, we're still hating on Fisher. I love it. I don't know.
You were really hating on Fisher. You had them losing to Ball State. That
I did
really
have them
didn't
losing
end
to
up
Ball State.
happening.
Look, guys, that was for the content. You got to understand. I think it's gonna. I think it's gonna really come down to how hard Saligo can outplay Saranac. I think Saligo should be stronger than Saranac in this series. And that mid jungle for Colorado, I think, has to play really, really well. That way, they're able to influence the map, as you said, Grapes. Because I think in the mid jungle is like, even though it's Keel, it's hard to jungle when your mid laner's getting wrecked, right? So if Saligo can handle Saranac, I do think Colorado has a chance. I think this series will be very competitive. I'll be spicy in the opposite direction, and I'm gonna flip flop and just say Fisher, you can make top 8, but 3-2. I think Colorado is gonna put up quite a fight here. I'm willing to believe in this team finally. I was one of their biggest haters, guys. So
yeah, making some waves after they barely ended up getting in. Thanks to the committee.
They were the last team in. Last team in, now making top 16. I mean, that I think in and of itself is a very exciting story for Colorado. And I think regardless of what happens in the series, they should be proud of their season. And if they can make this competitive, that would definitely be a big deal, I think, for the program.
Yeah, definitely. We can move on to our next matchup as we head down to the bottom left portion of the bracket, where Winthrop University is going to be playing against Grandview University. However, it was not the smooth sailing we expected from one of the top teams in the tournament, as Winthrop became the first number 1 seed to drop a game to an 8 seed when Campbellsville took that second game against them, forcing them to that decisive game 3. Winthrop did look very clean in the other 2 games, Hawk, but I will ask you this question. Do you think that does this move the needle for you in any way, or are you more worried about Winthrop now headed into the round of 16?
More worried, yes. Move the needle, probably not. I don't know, man. I still am willing to believe in Winthrop. I know how good this team can be. And I said this in the last episode. It feels like they're on the cusp of taking that next step. And just for whatever reason, they've never been able to do it. And that is concerning. But they're still right there. I think they might be able to do it at some point. Losing a game to Campbellsville, guys, just start not giving up Jinx. For whatever reason, this team just gets wrecked by that champ, okay? Don't give up Jinx. Winthrop will be fine. And you know what? At this point, I don't need Winthrop to 2-0, 3-0 everybody on their way to top 4. Just keep grinding it out, keep strong mental, and get those wins. If Winthrop can just keep winning games, one final test, right? Keep passing the test. I don't care how they do it, because this is a scrappy team. I want to believe that they can do it. I'm coping super hard right now, but no, I think Winthrop is not in trouble. It just is it's a blip on the radar. Keep moving. Just keep winning.
Yeah, I will say when you watch that game that they had against Campbellsville, it was kind of everything that could possibly go wrong happened in the early part of that game. They had a dive that they planned in the bottom side of the map, and then Jinx walked away with it basically with 3 kills after things ended up going bad. So you can criticize Winthrop for maybe autopiloting that play and being very predictable. I think that other teams are going to be able to exploit that if that ends up happening. But in terms of the players and their skill level, I don't think that this proves anything. At the end of the day, Winthrop still had a situation where they had Campbellsville's Nexus open and just were barely unable to close it out against a 24-kill Jinx. And shout out to Campbellsville for taking that game. But in terms of where I stand on Winthrop, it doesn't change too much. But partly because we already knew that this inconsistency was possible for them, and so this matchup against Grandview, I think it's actually going to be pretty close. GVU have been running that lane swap strategy. They did it to get Nightstar really ahead in their series against ISU. And I think, honestly, if they do it again here against Winthrop, you can, isolate Denethor away from a winning top lane matchup. You can get Nightstar ahead and just go band for band mobility versus Nightstar. I think that's actually a strategy that could work against Winthrop in this best of 5.
I definitely agree. As far as Campbellsville, by the way, I think the win for them should just be taken as like credit to Campbellsville, for pulling out a win over the Eagles. Yeah.
Some teams give away those resources and still aren't able to close out those games.
So congrats to them. In regards, like you said, to Winthrop GVU, I mobility, as you said, Grapes, you're talking about Nightstar on the GVU side. Mobility has to be on his game this weekend. Like it's non-negotiable. He has to be playing at his top level. We know how good mobility can be when he's on. I want to see it. Mobility, I believe in you. I'm here to say it. I'm willing to cope for you guys. I'm in your corner. Winthrop has to turn on the Jets. I know, talking to Colomer after their win over Winthrop in NECC finals, he said that he felt like Winthrop was caught off guard by the lane swaps back then. So I'm hoping that Winthrop could take that and as a learning experience, right? It's an early wake-up call before getting to the national championship and getting surprised when their season could end. I will give it to Winthrop in a close 3-1 because it seems like they're allergic to playing decisive games for the most part. However, against teams that they should be better than, usually they can, like in NACLQ, for example, right? They usually still won like 2-0, but it was like a messy 2-0. So I'll give them a messy 3-1.
Or they drop game 1, which is what they normally do.
Surprisingly,
the game that they dropped was not game 1 this time around.
Yeah, but I'll give them 3-1.
I'm gonna say 3-2 for a lot of the similar reasons. Winthrop's still winning this one. I'm not gonna get that spicy and have them get upset, but I really do think Grandview actually did play well, and I am looking forward to this best of 5, which will be happening Sunday at 3 p.m. on Winthrop Esports. We can move on to our next headline as we round out the left side of the bracket with the bottom half of that match of that quarterfinal bracket, with St. Clair taking on Ottawa, the number 1 seed from the East versus the number 3 seed from the MEC, who, again, as we mentioned earlier, we were not expecting to get here. They won that series against Weber State 2-1, and with that, Ottawa, Grandview, and Purdue Northwest, the 3 teams from the MEC, are all in the round of 16. They are the only region who did not have a single team get knocked out in that first round and are tied for the most teams in the top 16 with North and NECC and West. Did we underestimate this conference, Hawk? How good is the Midwest Esports Conference?
Yeah, I'm willing to use the word underestimated for this one. I definitely think people were sleeping super hard on the MEC. I did think Purdue Northwest would be pretty strong. I did not. Honestly, I think I'm more convinced from Purdue Northwest, though. I do think, based on how they played against Waterloo, they are living up to that 3-seed mantle. I thought they should have been a 4. So congrats to them. I think, Winking is quite good at the game. And Doubtful, Klexo, Prank, the rest of the squad, really rallying. I think Purdue Northwest looking good, and I think people took the scrappiness and the messiness and the parity and the MEC as there's no runaway favorite, so the region is not that strong. I think that might have been misconstrued as actually the region just has 3 really strong teams. So credit to MEC, they've showed up.
I will say it is like a very top-heavy conference, and those 3 teams are like definitely the best. I think Ohio Northern is all right, but they're probably in a very similar situation to like a UIUC, where we would not expect too much of them if they were voted into the championships. But these 3 teams are pretty good, and I'm definitely happy and excited to put this region in terms of the pool of players and teams that are participating in these championships. I would put them above West, absolutely. and then it gets interesting when you're comparing to some of the other conferences. North and NECC, probably not, just because even though there are 3 teams in their conference that made it to top 16, we are expecting more from all of those 3 teams as well. Northwood, SLU, Maryville, Fisher, Winthrop, and Ole Miss all have top 4 aspirations or higher, or around that level. I don't think any of these teams in the MEC are favored to win their next round. However, getting those 3 teams there is definitely impressive. And then you can have a conversation about South or East or some of those other conferences.
Yeah. And we can have a conversation about whether or not those MEC teams are going to win, because we said, I think Grandview has a chance against Winthrop. They could do it. Nightstar has been playing so well. And Ottawa against St. Clair. Now, Grapes, we've been very high on St. Clair, and St. Clair with a extremely convincing round 1 win. Granted, I think it was they were playing Florida. We did not expect much in that match. I think that was an expected win for St. Clair, but this is a team that has only dropped 1 game all year in collegiate. St. Clair has been on fire. Ottawa is probably their biggest test that they've had since they played Western. I mean, obviously, because they've only played one other team, but like, I think this is their other biggest test of the year. Western was number 1, and now Ottawa, debatably their second largest test of the year. I think Ottawa has a really good shot. This has been an inconsistent Ottawa team. Their form has been quite variable, but I do think they have scaled well into the year. I think Ottawa has a chance. Just on the basis of, I don't think St. Clair is going to skill check this team out of the tournament necessarily.
I will say, I think that they play similarly in terms of both playing heavily around their bottom lane. Rockboom for St. Clair and Levi for Ottawa got very fed in a lot of the games that we actually saw from them against Weber. And so because of that, I do think that Rockboom is pretty good and probably better than Levi. And so I will give it to St. Clair. I think their team play is really good. But I think I'll give it a 3-1. There's definitely a situation where Ottawa can take a game.
I'm feeling St. Clair 3-1 as well. I think Ottawa has definitely good odds to take a game. I don't think Ottawa is going to get just straight hands checked throughout the series, but I do think the way St. Clair plays the game is just superior from a team level.
Yeah, you can catch that series Sunday at 1 p.m. on Running the Rift. We'll have some great people on that call as well. We can move on to the other side of the bracket, where St. Louis University is going to be taking on the University of California, San Diego. That game will be right after St. Clair versus Ottawa on the Running the Rift channel. And St. Louis running with a bit of a new lineup. They have SkyTec down there in the support position, with Doxa, being the one who's been playing there a lot of the time. SkyTec's back. Hawk, does that change anything for you?
Fucking love SkyTec. Shout out SkyTec, friend of the show. No, it honestly does not change that much for me, though. It's interesting. I think, it depends on how much SkyTec has been playing, which from what I've heard is not that much. I mean, I think SkyTec is really, he was taking a step back from the game and everything. And now coming back. We'll see what kind of form he's on. Obviously, he played in top 32. I do think SkyTec is probably stronger than Doxa as a support. So on paper, it does make a bit of an upgrade. And, SkyTec reuniting the bot lane of him and Aaron alongside Winnie in the jungle that made top 4 last year. But I honestly don't think it changes a ton for this team. Because I think regardless of who you have at support, SLU's going to play the game basically the same way that they have for the last 2 years.
Yep. The identity remains the same. I mean, SkyTec is also a player that can pull out those weird champions in a very similar way to how Dox, as a former mid laner, could do that for Wildcard / SLU when he was playing down there. I think what I will say is that the strongest part of SLU on that top 4 run was their bottom lane. It was Aaron and SkyTec, that actually took a couple of fights against Shogo and Daption in the semifinals, specifically in that game number 1. And so reuniting that bot lane, if everything can come back together, I actually think could increase the ceiling a little bit. However, we do need to see what SkyTec does look like. It's a good matchup to test here in round of 16 against Shezamesi and Protoss, who are a very solid bot lane in their own right. And then we'll just have to see how he continues to look against higher and higher competition from that point forward.
I think this is the kind of thing where this could really be a good change for SLU come double elim. You're in lower bracket finals. That's when maybe they could be very lucky to have SkyTec, such an experienced support player, and someone that I think has never seen lights too bright, right? SkyTec always plays SkyTec's game, and I think that can be very valuable. I agree, Grapes. I think he played very well against UST last year. And speaking of, against UCSD, first of all, a rematch of their top 16 last year where SLU took a 2-0. Now we're on best of fives for this year. And they get that date against UST in top 8, assuming UST is able to win their match. So a lot on the line here for the Billikens. And Grapes, I'm just going to be straight. I think this is the least interesting top 16 matchup. I think SLU easily 3-0s this one. I unfortunately do not have very high expectations for UCSD in this series.
Yeah, check out that game 1 that they played against BU. That was probably the most interesting one singular game of the entire tournament. And they did look pretty good in the second game as well. However, it's 2 new top laners coming in for UTCSD. They run like a sub-tandem back and forth, and they're going up against 30. So it's going to be a bit of a tough one for them. I also have 3-0.
Yeah. It is what it is. We'll see if UCSD is able to change their fate from last year. Hey, if they make it to top 8, it'll be the furthest that the school has ever been in the college championship, which would be a pretty fantastic achievement for the team. But regardless, Grapes, we got a couple more matchups, starting with UST and Purdue Northwest.
Yeah, the University of St. Thomas, defending champions, took a pretty easy series against San Jose State, and they'll be playing up against the champions of the Midwest Esports Conference, Purdue Northwest, who had a very impressive series in their own right against the University of Waterloo. And so UST continuing to look pretty good. However, we have seen their struggles over the last couple of weeks in that series against UT Dallas, and then, specifically that series, I guess. And there's this general conversation about we might not expect UST to be at the top just yet, but we are expecting them to, put it together and play really well as the tournament goes on. When is that breaking point for this team? And if they struggle against Purdue Northwest, who is a good team, do we hit the panic button, or is it still that haven't played together narrative?
I think the narrative has to end right here, I kind of as you're alluding to, because I think Purdue Northwest is a good enough team where they might be able to beat a UST that's looking a little messy, like Purdue Northwest is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. They're, in my opinion, a pretty good team. And so UST, I think they've got to be on their game if they're going to get over this hump convincingly. And then their next test will be SLU, assuming SLU is able to take care of business against UCSD. And I don't care if it's double elim, UST against all the teams in the top 8 will have to be on their A game if they're going to make another run towards their 3-peat championship. They're going to run out of excuses very quickly. So I think this is the week where USD has to say, we're back.
Yep, absolutely. And I expect them to be, especially because the NACL season at this point has ended about a month ago. And so even for a lot of those players, even if they were just waiting until after the full season was over to start scrimming, it's been a full month. It's been more for most of those players who have been waiting around for a while after getting eliminated. So plenty of time to scrim together with UST. Hopefully they're going to be able to run at full strength from this point forward. And I agree. They're going to have to do it against Purdue Northwest because they do look really good right now. I think Purdue looked a little shaky, specifically in the OQs and then also in the opening round of the MEC playoffs. But since then, they've been on fire. In terms of predictions, who do you got here, Hawk?
I'm going to get spicy. I'm going to give it to UST, but I'm going to say it takes 5.
Wow. Purdue Northwest is legit. I think Winking played really well.
Purdue Northwest is real, yeah.
Yeah, Klexo had a great series on his assassins that he always knows how to play. And so I am leaning a little bit towards that. I would say 3-1 for UST, though. I don't think Purdue take this series, but I think they get a game. I think UST, I probably have a bit of a stronger opinion than you do of them. Just I don't know if it'll be a super close 3-1, but it'll be a 3-1.
I think UST, if they're on form, should be a top 3 team in this tournament. But we'll see. Yeah.
We'll see.
I think this match is going to tell us a lot, both about Purdue Northwest's growth as a program, already coming further than they ever have, and UST, how they've been able to rally with these new players. So it's going to be a very interesting one to watch. But Grapes, now we have the last quadrant, Quad D, starting with Ole Miss against Oklahoma Christian, with one certain player that used to be on those repeat UST rosters, now coming to Ole Miss, Shogo. At this point, Grapes, when you've won 2 college championships in a row, you're in your 3rd one, you have to start having GOAT conversations.
Yeah. And, okay, so I guess the question is, what does Shogo have to do to become the CLOL GOAT, or has he already gotten there? Maybe we can have that conversation if you want. There's always a LeBron versus Jordan argument about different eras. You could argue probably Saskia in that other position as somebody who hasn't been around for a while but did win a bunch of championships with Maryville and then Winthrop. But I wasn't really around for that era, so I caught the tail end of it on Winthrop in that last year. But overall, what Shogo has done with this UST roster specifically has been really impressive, and then seeing him now on a new team with Ole Miss, still looking dominant, has also been very cool. In terms of GOAT status, I think he probably needs like another really big run, but I think with the way Ole Miss is playing, that could definitely happen in this tournament in this year.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think Saskia is the other one in the conversation, but much like I was not alive for Michael Jordan. I also was not CLOL conscious back when Saskia was winning championships. So Shogo is the best player that I've ever known in collegiate. I mean, I think he's undoubtedly the best right now. There's an argument to be made for Surdy on Slew just as like terms of mechanical individual talent, but like Surdy is not a legendary collegiate player, right? Like Shogo is. And they're probably the two individual best players in this tournament. So, yeah, I think Shogo, I said it before, if he can pull this Ole Miss team to the grand finals, if he can get them to Boise, I think that solidifies it, because this is an Ole Miss team that has quite an eclectic mix of experienced veterans and, I mean, complete nobodies outside of what they've done on Ole Miss. And I say that, you know, with love to like KJ and Uncle Sam, right, have built their careers on this team, and they've come so far in their own right. And with Shogo alongside them, I mean, it would be an incredible achievement to bring a roster of kind of misfit toys, I think, for Ole Miss to the LAN finals. That would be an incredible achievement.
Yeah, I don't even think they have to win against Maryville,
I don't think
because
so
we all
either.
know Maryville is like a heavy favorite, or if it's anyone else, I think just getting to that stage would be impressive on its own. And a three-peat could happen for one of them. It could either be for Shogo or it could be for the other guys over on St. Thomas. Predictions. I think it's as good as OC has looked recently, and as exciting their series against Bethany was. I think Ole Miss is just on fire right now. They had a bit of a shaky first game against Aquinas, but that's not going to matter too much for me. I have them winning 3-0.
Yeah, I have Ole Miss 3-0 as well. This team just feels like they're so good against teams that are worse than them, right? Like, for as good as I think OC actually has been over the last couple months, Ole Miss completely dominates teams that just aren't quite on their level. And I think that just won't change regardless of how good OC has been.
Let's move on to our last matchup here, Western Ontario versus Northwood, and I think, Hawk, we might have saved the best matchup for last. Western getting that first victory, as well as Northwood in a very thrilling form against Converse. Western handled things a little bit easier against USC, but that Converse series was crazy, Hawk. We could talk about that a little bit. Is Northwood about to be a part of the best series of both the first and second rounds of CLOL?
Yes. No elaboration needed, really. I mean, we anticipated this to be the best matchup of top 16 before the bracket even started. Northwood just played a banger against Converse. I mean, I think these are two teams with so much to prove. We think it's the strongest 3 seed against the weakest 2 seed. This is definitely the biggest matchup as far as implications, because also remember, winner gets to go to double elim. And I think both Western and Northwood, while they're not favorites to necessarily win the whole thing, I would not want to play either of these teams in double elim, no matter who I am. Western in particular has been pretty damn good as of late. I mean, their only stumbling block has been this incredibly powerful St. Clair team, and Western is the only one to take a game off them all year, right? Like, and then Northwood has been cutting their teeth on Slew and Maryville all year. So this is like a crazy, crazy, crazy matchup. I think this is going to be extremely exciting. I've got Western in 4, but
Man, you took my prediction. I was gonna say that.
Oh, really? Okay, I thought I was
now I
being a
gotta be
little
different
spicy
for the
saying in 4.
Now I gotta be different for the content.
I've got Western in 4, but I think it's going to be a very tense 4, and I would not be surprised if it goes 5.
Yeah, I think Northwood at the start, or a couple of weeks ago, I'd probably think of them beating Western pretty easily. However, their series against ISU was shaky, and their series against Converse was also shaky. I do think that, you know, Northwood played pretty well, specifically in that Game 3. Shout out to Izo for the pentakill on the Urgot.
Yeah, Maokai God no longer,
game.
Dude.
Yeah.
I love his
and
tweet, by the way, where he's like I don't who had Izo Urgot pentakill in their parlay. That was funny.
Yeah, and I think that with the bottom lanes being so competitive, and Enthrall really carried Northwood throughout a lot of that Northwood series as well against Devin. I think him versus Lynx is going to be something to watch out for. I think these are two very well-rounded rosters, and it's going to come down to who plays better on the day. And so far, over the last couple of weeks, Western, W School is confusing them. Western looked better on the days that they have played compared to what Northwood had. So I'll say 3-2 just for content, but I still think Western do win.
All right. Expectation is that Western makes it, but Graves, that's a little taste for everybody of what to expect moving forward. There are a lot of good matchups. I mean, this top 16 is going to be extremely exciting. And the double elim after that best of fives. And you can find all of it on twitch.tv/saltyrunbackpod and twitch.tv/runningtherift. We've also got a side of Winthrop Esports for the matchup this week. So make sure to check all that out. Follow at Salty Runback Pod on Twitter for all of the updates, as well as probably me and Grapes are going to be doing like a lot of our own updates. If you want to know everything that's happening with Collegiate, we are probably the best place to come, if I'm being completely honest. So make sure you're staying tuned there. And great. I mean, what a ride it's been so far with this Collegiate season, and now we are finally really getting into it with the rest of the championship.
Make sure to check our social media for the full schedule of all the games. I know I tried to hit on a bunch of them throughout the headlines, but I definitely know I forgot some of them. If you are trying to figure out what time your team is playing, you can check that all down there. It'll be either Saturday or Sunday, a best of 5 for each of them until they get into that top 8 bracket, and then that's when things get really wild. So make sure you buckle in here at the start, because you're not going to want to miss a single second.
It's going to be a really good one. And if you think that Northwood is going to take down Western, you can take what we said with a grain of salt. I've been Hawk, that's been Grapes, and we'll see you all for CLOL.